I just wanted to get us together. I know both Casey and I both ran, well, I guess all three of us really ran heavily on Vision Zero issues. I've been going over all the Vision Zero documents. I know you have a number of thoughts about it, and I kind of, since we can't have, these conversations out in public, I just wanted to, or privately, just kind of wanted to get everyone together and talk through what our thoughts were for how we go forward, some of the plans that I have going forward, and see what you guys' thoughts are.
Sure.
So yeah, I don't know, you have the Vision, I've been reading through, where's this Vision Zero document? We got a Vision Zero document from years ago, right? That kind of,
The 2020 framework?
yeah, the 2020 framework.
I think there are documents that go even farther back than that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is just this is a
Yeah.
continuously updated document.
Yeah, because it was in conversation. I mean, the phrase Vision Zero was in regular use at City Hall before I was elected in 17.
Yeah, there's I was going through a number of other Vision Zero documents that I have up here, and I mean, that term, this term has been used on, like concepts of this go back a long way. Like I remember I was talking to David Coffey the other day about like how trying to work on street stuff, and he's like, oh, we called that pedestrian dignity back in the 80s when I was around. Like it's just, it comes in different terms for it. But maybe you could just start off what is the background of all the Vision Zero work, and where are we coming into at this point?
So Mayor Poe ran on it in 16, and so did Commissioner Santos, and they had been the driving forces really behind it. To me, I feel like it lost a lot of steam along the way because it was a phrase without a whole lot to really back it up. Now, in the process, we did pass some good things that give us opportunities to make better streets for city streets, which are primarily neighborhood streets. And we should be careful about how we redesign those streets. We talked 2 years ago, I think, 2 budgets ago. We put some money aside, maybe 1 budget ago, to put money aside to when we renovate a street, when we repave. I forget what the level of change has to be, but we would rebuild it, and essentially what becomes a complete street.
Yeah.
I personally find the complete streets model a more useful thing to talk about than Vision Zero, because both make people ask questions because they're not real clear, but one is something that's easier to explain in how we can do it.
Right, because the Vision Zero is tied much more to the true goal outcome, right? So
Right.
this is the true goal outcome, but what we do, we create complete streets,
Yes.
or we encourage, particularly if it's county, state, or perhaps even the private portions of developments that are privately maintained. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Vision Zero is, and that's the thing, it's a vision, right? It is not necessarily, we have a framework for it, but in and of itself, it lends people to just the easy, we don't want people to die on our roads and streets, or sidewalks, trails, and anything.
Right.
So I understand why it's talking about the complete streets, and that's where people start to visualize some of what we're talking about.
Right, that's the action toward Vision Zero.
Right, and then it comes out in slightly different ways. I mean, I have, I'll go show you guys this before it comes up for a GPC, but as well as City of Dublin, which is really common bicycle pedestrian guidelines. But like, you get like this with the Vision Zero report, where they're talking about very specific analysis of, severe crashes as permissive left turns are in 11%. That's a very different, like looking at these very specific, like where a crash is occurring, where are they coming out, is very different than saying like, well, what streets are not complete streets and how do we make them complete streets, right? And tomato, I mean, it gets us to certain goals that we're looking at. All right, cool. Well, one of the things I noticed with I have this other document up by UNC, University of North Carolina, that kind of talks about what the goals of a Vision Zero document and plan should be. And then really focuses a lot on SMART goals, like having actionable steps. We kind of have that within our Vision Zero document, but nothing quite like, say, like Cambridge does, or Dallas, or a lot of the ones that they use as examples, like establish rapid response protocol for fatalities and serious injuries within 3 years. cars, grow network of separated bike lanes with kind of specific numbers associated with it.
Yeah, we do investigate every pedestrian death,
Mhm.
or every death, but there's a specific protocol at GPD for how that works. I hate to put you in the spotlight without preparation, but you probably have information about how we do that.
The investigation of crashes.
Yeah.
Well, we look on the perspective after it occurs, then we document, we know the locations, we're examining trends and seeing what caused that crash, what the behavior issues, what are the infrastructure issues that may have caused, what are the speeds, and then how does it relate to the other crashes that we're seeing over a period of time to determine if there were trends and everything else. And then GPD, we work with GPD as well, and then they do a more focused detail on the response side.
Okay. But we respond pretty quickly on that,
Yes,
correct?
Yes, 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 and I think they send investigators to determine like the braking, visibility, distances, all the other engineering factors that make it associated with it.
Gotcha.
All right. I was just using that as an example, but do you mind coming up? Can we pick your brain a little bit more? Is that how, I don't know how this
That's
normally
fine. I
goes.
mean,
Yeah.
these meetings work in lots of different ways.
All right.
Here's
Good,
one.
good. Come on up.
Yeah, just a bit.
Matter of fact, do y'all mind if we just bring everybody
No,
to the
come
table?
on.
Well, let's do that, because there'll be conversation as we go.
So you were at the Vision Zero, this action plan that we're looking over.
Yeah, I would say it was like an effort, in-house effort, and one of the ones that you see that are more sophisticated, they have consultants coming on board. So we've been working on this area for a long time, but we were able to do something quickly with the resources that we had available. We continue to implement some of those strategies that we identified. We are working more collaboratively with the county and investing more in outreach and looking for opportunities. But we're working on hiring a Vision Zero coordinator
Okay.
at the moment. So
Do you
then
want to do that?
having more of that expertise in-house, and then maybe seeking to, that person can be more of the dedicated, focused staff person, because right now we juggle multiple things. So that person will help develop a more robust plan, looking into performance measures and taking on some of the other things that we have not been able to accomplish that are listed there.
Great.
And then we have, we're reinstating the work group also with the multiple agencies. So we have our meeting coming up in about 2 weeks, I think, with a multi-agency with the county, FDOT, UF, law enforcement. So I hope to have the person on staff within a month or so, hopefully.
Excellent.
Good, and that's been budgeted, that's ready to go with that Vision Zero.
We are kind of reallocating, shuffling around the funds available that we have right now to be able to cover the position, but I think it's a significant step in moving forward to try to take the plan to the next level and then continue to identify the trends and then seek other grants. And because we have a lot of big projects going on right now, so we need that augmented staff to be able to handle that. And then if we can secure additional funds, then we can bring also a consultant on board to try to even expand that effort a little bit to create a even more robust plan than what we would have the ability to do in-house.
That's right. Perfect.
Very good.
And then, so we'll have that with the Vision Zero, and then we're also going to be coming out with a bicycle pedestrian master plan. We're working with the county, correct, at this point? And that, I think that should be coming back to our commissions within the month. if
Yeah, I
recall.
believe the county is taking the lead because it didn't have any traction under the MTPO, and then the county will be taking the lead on that. I heard that they're going to be taking it to the county commission by February, coming up before the end of the month, and then it will circulate back. And we have 40,000 allocated from the city side. The county has 40 and the university 20.
Okay. And do you know what the scope of that is, or is that going to be determined?
Is going to look into the bicycle facility, where are the gaps for the bicycle and pedestrian network within primarily the MTPO boundaries, And the county is also considering expanding that to look into connectivity to major other trails, regional trails. But I think the primary focus should be, that was one of my comments, that maybe since the resources are so limited, to stay within the boundaries that we can control, and they're a more urbanized area, to promote mobility into that area. And then the other ones, if the county maybe has additional funding, to look into those additional connections, which are important, but given that the funding is just so, the pot of money is so limited.
When you say so limited, what is a
The
typical
100.
bicycle and pedestrian? Oh, I recall, so 100,000, what would a typical one run for a, I guess, just like an urbanized area of the city of Gainesville, like MTPO does?
I think that the costs have been raising so much for everything, so we've done, like just for that one corridor study, we spent what, 162 for the University in 13th, or I think that was the first phase.
Yeah,
So,
that was just one
yeah.
phase, yeah.
So I think in the range of 200
Okay.
for a more robust plan, I'm thinking.
So I'm always, frustrated is the wrong word, but it's the closest word. I love the idea that when the county tries to do larger trails and connect neighborhoods outside, on the fringes of the urbanized area. That's great, and it's nice. But to your point the other day about transit in the city, our trail system in the urban core is the right place to start.
Mhm.
And I believe, putting those funds into the urban core and then building out from there instead of trying to build, this is a good headline, so we'll build this one out here. And I'm not accusing anybody of that, but that's often what happens. And it becomes a cause célèbre to build the Archer Braid Trail, for instance, which it's nice once it's there, but it's a far more limited use than something that is used for transportation inside the urban core.
And sometimes, and so one of the, traditionally the rail trails, it's been the lowest hanging, some of these have been the lowest hanging fruit because the acquisition costs are very low.
Right.
Sometimes the construction cost per mile, linear foot, also ends up being low. And so those are the or even where you have new development, new construction, and you can work with, developers. So we traditionally here, other cities that have gone after those opportunities because they can get miles into the system, they can kind of proof of concept it a little bit, but the problem is that then we don't, the part of the proof of concept that's not there is heavy usage. Heavy usage for the purpose of real transportation as opposed to exercise. Exercise is great. My mother said the best thing the city of Fayetteville, Arkansas did for her was do a trail system that she uses. She drives to the trail, takes her bike off, but then she exercises. She feels great, comfortable. And that's great. It's an important part of the healthy life in the city, of the transportation aspect. Closer to the urbanized core, where people live to where they need to go to work. And so some of that ends up being per square foot perhaps more expensive. Acquisition costs may be more expensive, but then what are we getting out of it? If we're really getting ease of transportation for people so that they don't have to spend their money on vehicles and cars and gasoline, and really connecting people from where they live to their jobs or other services.
And I think it's important insofar as like where you live, I think was the county in the 60s, right? Until it was annexed, where your district was the county up until 2005 or so. So you start creating the right of way that is designed for multimodal use now, that's going to be it's a good chance that, Hale Plantation could be in the city in 50 years from now. And that now has the right of way that we can now utilize at that point. But I agree with you that it's that where if right now, if you were someone who works at the University of Florida and lives in Briarwood, that is a bikeable pathway to you in a way that if you live in Hale and you're trying to get to the University of Florida, it's just unlikely. You're just not going to be able to do it.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's also unlikely that you will because the distance is higher, and it just isn't.
The hardcore committed people will do it, particularly once the connection is completely done.
I have a battery that moves my bike, and I wouldn't ride for Hale Plantation at the University of Florida. I agree. I have spoken with right before coming here with Commissioner Prizia. She's going to be asking her transportation staff about the same question that you just brought up kind of on your own, which is, do we think that this is enough money for this? And it might be worth pressing them to see if we could get, if that dollar amount could be configured. University of Florida, I got this bug in my ear from Linda Dixon at UF, who mentioned that she thought that this was a absurdly low amount of money for what we're trying to get out of it. And so hopefully we can do that, because the last time we did this, I found one from 2000.
Yeah, it's very old, and then over time we complemented, but the one that was done, I don't know, 20 years ago, it was done in little segments, so we gave a range per tiny segment, and then you had to kind of, on our own, kind of decipher what are the priorities and what are the best segments and what would comprise a trail, what are the needs based on the tiny segments. So this would be different, just looking more holistically, where are the gaps, what are the opportunities, and how do we prioritize them. That's primarily what I think we're going to be able to get. But I was going to add to the conversation of the trails. What we've been doing is we're able to identify several GRU easements, utility easements. So that's the trails that we have been coordinating and implementing through with the Wild Spaces Public Places funding, coordinating with their staff. So we have a few coming along right now
Like
that are programmed.
The Infinity Trail, the Infinity Loop, right? Partially, does that use GRU
That
right
one-
away?
That
Can't
one is
remember.
not, well, segments of those that go, down from Depot Park and the Sweetwater extension there, and then connecting along Willowstone Road. We also request they're resurfacing that road, so part of the, one of the asks was if they could complement the sidewalk gap to connect to the residential, to the northeast, I guess, going up. So that would be kind of a comprehensive facility there, and that's programmed for construction, I think, this year coming up. And then we have Northeast 31st connecting Waldo Road to 15th, and then we just recently added bike facilities on 15th Street and decreased the speed. And then we have a bike facility that runs on the GRU power line easement. And then we have one on Southeast 8th Avenue that's programmed to occur in a fairly short term, and then 15th Street.
Is that the one east of 15th Street?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right now I don't have the map configured correctly in my head, but.
I'll leap into this one. I was going to leave it for the second point, but another proposal I have coming before us is essentially what you see in a lot of municipalities are things like this. Like this is Tallahassee and Leon counties combined. Greenways master plan. These are very, very common. Either Austin calls it an urban trails master plan. They obviously call it a greenways master plan. I think that fits a little bit better for what Gainesville's thinking, which would be a mix of paved and unpaved roads. Ewan's here, who's been kind of putting bugs in my ear over this, and has been working on this for how many decades now, Ewan? For a while.
Long enough to know where they all are.
What we have in our area is just a remarkable amount of trails. I know that's a big reason why my wife moved here and I moved here, is there's a great amount of trails, and we have these creeks that run through the city of Gainesville that are very unique to the city of Gainesville, and are, allow both mobility but just sort of recreational opportunities right into the centerpiece of where we all live. And I know, as Ewan has pointed out, who has really taken a lot of time to know each parcel and where things are, like the acquisition of those in order to make those sort of interconnected can take some time. Some of them are in private land, some of them are in public land, but really coming up with a plan for how those interconnect and how we're able to create that mobility through the city, creating a long-term plan for how that we want to do that would then allow staff to say, well, when certain parcels come up, or if we're able to lob off a back while giving certain development rights to the front portion of a certain parcel, we can start slowly bringing those things into there so that we'll have that off-road mobility, whether that's just walking trails or whether that's paved trails. I know this is something that you've been working on as well. That Ewan, if you have anything you wanted to add to any of this.
I think there is a way that the city, if the city could come up with a policy that basically stated that any development that has been developed and has moved density from a wetland setback to, where the buildable space, then that wetland setback can be sold to the city, to Metro Conservation Trust, deeded to it in some way and used for trails and also for stewardship. There's a lot of parcels around. In fact, in my neighborhood, I know of parcels where part of the development directive was to steward the land which was set back from the creek. And of course, homeowner association don't do that. Frequently, even though it was a legal requirement, it just wasn't done. It's still not done. So what happens is you find volunteer groups like Current Problems come in and they clean the trash, take away our dishes, and they can only do that because it's an existing trail. Now these trails go through private land. Technically, everybody that walks along that trail is trespassing. But frequently what happens is the major problem trespassers are the ones that decide to stay and set up campsites. And in fact, in my neighborhood, I live in the Richview neighborhood, it's a concern of the neighbors. We have security concerns because there's trails along the creek where there are homeless encampments that are littering the creek, which is actually against the wetland ordinance. So they could be anyone that leaves litter around their campsite, they could get a ticket. There's no ordinance against camping on private property, but there is against littering. So there is an enforceable ordinance that could be used to address it, but the main problem is that the owners of the property don't police it themselves. And Current Problems or Keep Alachua County Beautiful cannot police it. You can't go up to homeless and say, get out, you're making a mess. You know, you might, don't know what state of mind they're in anyway. So if there's some way that the city could come up with a policy that basically says that if you have transferred your density from this, you can never develop in it anyway. Why don't we just hand it over to some authority that is willing and able to take care of it and use it for trails? And as Commissioner Eastman just said, these trails could be as simple as the tracks that are there now, which are used for mountain biking and walking. And it's amazing if you're walking down these trails how many neighbors you see using them. They get known in the neighborhood. They're very popular unless it becomes unsafe. Sometimes it's unsafe. In other areas where it's possible, we could actually put a paved trail and use it as a transportation corridor. And this sort of goes hand in hand with wild spaces, public places, is where there's now a fairly large pot of money that can be used for, you could make parks, so you can have active parks. Or you could have these recreational facilities that are basically green space that are used for passive recreation. In other words, people just walk along, they don't have bathrooms. Incredibly cheap. Anyone could make a trail through a creek as long as you do it responsibly. So we're an opportunity for where we could make this decision of, do we spend the wild spaces money on places where the first thing you have to do is put a parking lot because the neighborhood is not connected. People have to drive their car there. They drive their car there, they do whatever it is, and then they drive home again. Whereas the same space could be used with a little bit of simple planning to connect to another space, so somebody can jump on their bicycle, frequently just walk from their home, use the facilities and walk back. And if you think of the carbon footprint of a conservation type park versus a public use park, or what they call an active park, there's just a night and day difference. I tuned in, I don't know whether any of you else tuned into the County Commission meeting yesterday, where they talked about how to allocate wild spaces, public places, and there was 2 presentations, and I recommend you go listen to it, because it's the 2 points of view. There was, the county has 2 departments now. They have Parks Department, and they have Conservation, Alachua County Forever Department, and they're sort of fighting for the same pot of money. So these 2 presentations were, there's sort of a night and day difference. So the Parks Contingency's plan was to basically put parks out in the county. This is an unincorporated county where there's very low population density, But there's no parks. So they're saying, well, we should, they use the word equity, which there was some debate about whether that was the correct word or not. Just put parks out there because there's no park within a 6-mile radius here, so we need a park somewhere. Now, if you think about it, that park is probably going to be on a 60-mile-an-hour highway. The only way to get to it is by car. It has to have a parking space, a parking lot. And the carbon footprint is going to be higher. Maybe there's a playground there. Well, how many people are going to drive their car so the kids can play in a playground, something that's 5 miles away? As opposed to, and the conservation element, on the other hand, they talked about preserving conservation areas for green corridors, which are wildlife corridors, which are huge in the county. They're all the way down the eastern seaboard, eastern side of the county. And so it's on the city scale, things are scaled down, but we do have these existing corridors. We have creeks throughout the city. These creeks have setbacks. They're green spaces. They're already wildlife corridors. However, they've not been maintained. They're not healthy. If you have people camping in there, it definitely hurts the water quality. There's litter, there's invasive plants. It degrades the environment considerably. And so if we think of those, the wildlife corridors that are there, like we have otters in our backyard because they come up the creek, alligators, deer, coyotes. Everything uses these green spaces for wildlife. Use existing creeks inside the urban setting as it is now. If we just extend that idea to make these greenways, wildlife corridors, also transportation corridors, and also corridors that can be used for recreation and public health, basically, throughout the whole city.
Yeah, so, and I always, where I got my first real taste and dose of trail systems as transportation in Fayetteville, Arkansas, it's a hillier area, and their creek system is intense, and their creek system has a lot of the streets that cross it are bridges, and they're up high. So we in Fayetteville, Arkansas, they run trails underneath, and so then it's this great separation of users, right, from all these cross streets, and it makes there's all kinds of you can not cross a street for a mile. It's great on a trail, and they've used this kind of riparian area for it, and some of it's been deeded off by owners. But in the state of Florida, our beaches are public, right? And we have this like public right of way, and we don't have beaches in Alachua County or in Gainesville, but we do have this natural resource of creeks. And in essence, it starts to sound like if they can't really develop there anyways, but if it can come to the city or Alachua County forever or whatever, that we can help, that the city or the county can help maintain it, use it for transportation, and one of the reasons, this is again low acquisition cost. You can't really build anything there. The price tends to not be that high. Also, it's not currently built on, so this is where trails end up in these riparian corridors. And it's not because we're picking on waterways to handle our transportation. It's just in an urban area. It's easy. It's easy. But it's got the benefit of being beautiful and sometimes, perhaps not here, but we're in Fayetteville, Arkansas. They're definitely floodways, and so there's some conversation that some of the transportation gets flooded at certain points, but those trails are built in a way that they don't impede hydrology. That's the goal, is to not impede. But sometimes they flood out, right? You get a hurricane, and so what you've built as transportation is flooded, and so that becomes something you have to balance out to make sure that that all your transportation, bike transportation or walking transportation, is susceptible to flooding. Every hurricane or tropical storm.
How do we quantify, I'm sure there's a way, but how do we quantify the value of a transportation corridor, a trail transportation corridor? So I don't know if we do counts or how we would do it, because it is more expensive to sometimes acquire a very small piece of land and make that part of a transportation corridor. But if it's, if it has a high value, then it makes sense to do that. And sometimes that's better than getting lots of cheap opportunities, because it's going to actually get used and will actually impact people's lives.
Is that what a full study would entail? Because you said about finding the gaps, and part of it is to help us prioritize. So is that some of the stuff that they would,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, look at what are you connecting, right? The residential areas to employment opportunities or to commercial opportunities, or separating that bike transportation and also providing the recreational aspect, right? Because you can, it's dual purpose. It's not just for recreation and it's not just for transportation, because you could just walk like your mom or bike along the trail. We do quantify with the counts once they're existing, but for the ones that are on the list for the wild spaces, we've looked at more of the urban trails, like complementing the 6th Street Trail to the north that has been on the plans for a long time, and we've been working with the contamination issues and a remediation plan. Or on the southwest, all of that area, residential area, student-oriented, and then what are the opportunities to connect all this to Butler Plaza, so all of those people don't need to rely on a car to go such a short distance. So there's a lot of going on down there, all of that 40th Boulevard Trail, and then Southwest 47th, and then we're continuing that piece is under design now, and then we got funding from the state. So it's just looking at more of what are the origin destinations, what are the opportunities in this area, and then what are the higher densities for now. And the same thing on the east side, how do we bring all of those folks that may rely on transit or may not have, or maybe a single vehicle household or no vehicles, and then how do we offer a different opportunity for them to move or to reach the employment or commercial areas. And then once we have the trails in place, we have counters that we move around, and we were able to obtain a few more, but so we're building that count system so we can monitor the progress over time.
Yeah, the term, I think, from the one bicycle master plan that we have, which is, like, as you said, from 20 years ago, I think they use the term latent demand. Is that where it's just essentially like, where do we have density of residential and where do we have density of jobs? It's actually much easier in Gainesville than it would say in Miami, Orlando, places that don't have, like, we have a lot of people living on the southwest side, and we got a lot of people that are going to the University of Florida. We know exactly where they're going. The data is actually, I'd say, easier here than in almost any city I could think of off the top of my head to figure out what, like, and, you know, so figuring out where exactly those off-road corridors would go. Now, going down Archer Road is probably one of the harder ones that we could focus on, but it's also pretty clearly, I think, from the data, you know, where people are living and where they want to go is, you know, pretty straightforward.
Right, but I think part of when we talk about this is that there are probably, and someone, you know, experts can help us figure this out, there's probably opportunities, that kind of seems obvious, but there's probably things that we are missing that are really small connections. Like, I'm trying to remember what was just east of Main, just west of Main Street. They did a small connection. They streets that used to dead end, and they put some sort of trail walkway through. And that kind of very small section, I don't know if there's a lot of data behind that, but these little small pieces that we might be missing, because we, you know, going to the university, that's the easy example. But if the truth is people on a bike are going from a large student complex on a bike or walking to, I don't know, the liquor store. I don't know. Is it that they just need a connection? Is it currently, and we see this through, you know, these desire paths where they go, right? They, you know, we already see it worn into the grass. They're already traveling that way, but they're not traveling safely. They're possibly trespassing on, you know, private land to get there. So I think some of the big pieces we have, you know, like you said, it's pretty obvious where we have so many jobs or student, you know, spaces, and then so many people living. But I am really interested to find if some of this, if there are smaller, simpler connections that really open up, where that demand suddenly, you know, I mean, it's the same way if you can't get to the neighbor behind you, if you have to walk a mile around, you need a connection, right? So I'm interested in that. I think they'll be able to talk. But you're right. That some of this we know, and it's about figuring out and prioritizing it. Some of them may not, you know, rise to the top of priority because some of them may be. I just argued against quicker, easier, and cheaper, right? But I'm interested in some of those kind of call a keystone project or something
Yeah.
that really opens up you know.
And I think what you were asking for is there some kind of objective data? I mean, one of the things, with all this stuff, whether it's the Greenways Master Plan or like I'll go into sort of setting street standards, like because transportation takes so long. I mean, for like if we have an idea, we have to send it to the MTPO. The MTPO may start breaking dirt if we're really lucky in 10 years. That would be another 5 years by the time we get it done. Like you kind of have to set standards, set how you're going to set the metrics for where you're determining where things go, and then you got to try to funnel, find a way that you can get consistent funding there. And so finding a structure, like how exactly are we prioritizing this? Are we prioritizing it based on recreation? Are we prioritizing it based on transportation? Is it transportation from where we think growth is happening or where people are currently living? I'd imagine that's all the kind of thing that you guys are looking at.
And we have like prioritization criteria and that we use as well, looking at socioeconomic data, what types of corridors are in the surrounding area, where the level of the crash is, all of that kind of stuff. But I think what we have, and we did an effort, we have those smaller connectors, we have that mapped, and I think it's on that map online, but I think we need to make maybe a larger push to make that information more available or distribute, make the people aware that that information is there. So they can access, and I think one of the things that we have too, I would say, I've been here a long time, so I think we have all of the pieces that these plans have, but they're in different places.
Mhm.
So we have pieces in the comprehensive plan that tell you that we have to build at least 1 mile of sidewalks and 1 mile of trails every year. We have all of the policy guidance that we need to make the system safer. We have to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists, and it's all in there. And the design manual gives specific standards of what kind of facility goes somewhere and points to all of these best practices, NACTO, ITE, FDOT, all of those complete streets. But we don't have one document that would say, oh, here is our bike and pedestrian plan. I think it's all kind of piecemeal. We do have an effort right now going on, it's funded. We are revising the TMPA standards. So it's our mobility plan, pretty much how do we fund, what are the needs and how do we fund those needs, and then structuring it better to have a better funding mechanism, because as the city developed and evolved, and we have a large chunk of the city that don't contribute anything, but it's also where most of the development is happening. So we have an opportunity to kind of revise that and to better meet the needs and future projected needs. And we are going to include more of this bicycle pedestrian components in the standards in this mobility plan. So I don't know if that would meet the intent, or if the city commission would like to see it like a separate dedicated document. It's just that then we're going to have the bicycle and pedestrian master plan for the area that is like a component, and then we have our mobility plan, and then we have the comp plan, and then we have, so it just ends up being too many plans.
Well, we can definitely certainly consolidate, or if something is unnecessary. I mean, we need more people in your department, and really across the city of Gainesville. And so using staff time on things that we don't want things to be duplicative. But and just to jump off on also the is on the greenways, the GRU is also it's all everything's kind of forming together all at the same time. GRU is also looking at how do we deal with our pipes. We have pipes that, like a lot of cities, our sewage and wastewater go down for using our streams. So you'll have, which made a whole lot of sense 1940s, 1950s, because we have flat land. You can just kind of bring it down, and it kind of naturally flows down to our South Main wastewater treatment plant. Problem is that anytime there's a failure along any of those pipes, it goes directly into our water stream. And so figuring out how to get, they're going to figure out what makes sense to continue having it there versus moving it off of being in our streams. But then there's also a problem of just getting access to those so that you can test on a regular basis to make sure that there's not a contamination coming out. Having easy access to that. So they're actually, there's current acquisitions and thoughts about how to get GRU better access to those same exact creeks that we're talking about for recreation, same exact creeks that we're talking about for transportation, or just having access to it that's just for water quality and clean water, that all of these funds can kind of be leveraged on top of one another to really, I think, move quickly on all this stuff, which would be, yeah.
And one thing that I should mention, through the land development process, we coordinate the different departments and the needs and get easements and try to the maximum extent possible create this interconnectivity so you don't have to come out on the road again to circulate to go to the next development, right, or even to a housing. So we try to the extent possible do that and implement that, looking for opportunities. And some of the developments, as they occur, they help build pieces of the infrastructure, like along Pole Road. That road's been in the plans for 20 plus years, and it's been built incrementally as that land develops, and then we're adding the road and adding the trail, all of that piece that connects through Butler Plaza and eventually through Celebration Point, through kind of how all of that is going to be as programmed as a trail, but it all functions in conjunction with the land development.
So now we're just gonna get you have to help us fix is it the portion that's not done is between Southwest Rec and is it just Southwest Rec to 34th? And I know there's a section past Celebration Point through Kanapaha out there, but for Orchard Parade Trail.
Through Kanapaha, I think the county they
Yeah.
still have that commitment to build that portion. I don't know the timing. And then we have, for us, all of that piece is connected, and we'll be trying to bring something down to connect to 40th Boulevard, along 40th Boulevard to Archer Road, and then you can pick up the trail from there and go create this pretty complete loop around the whole thing, because you have the UF trail, then
But does the UF Trail go all the way to 34th?
I
For
think
some
it
reason,
might be
I
like
think
a wider
right by
sidewalk in there.
the volleyball courts, I think it just goes down to a normal sidewalk. And that was a section of it I was still a little confused,
Yeah,
because they opened up so much of it through campus,
Mhm.
like I work right on it basically.
Yeah.
And I did, it was something that came to mind. I thought, when are they gonna,
Yeah, I think there are some challenges with the space and utilities and the setbacks and whatever, but in some areas. But it may be where we're trying to build as much as possible and try to address the little pieces, but try to get them as much as we can.
So, one of the greenways that's been talked about for a long time that there's just never any action on, except accidentally for recreation, is Hogtown Creek Greenway. We know there's nothing paved or very few. It's only mountain bikeable through Ring Park. Lots of that's not a realistic transportation greenway. There are pieces south of 16th Avenue that connect really well and along 16th Avenue. I'd like us to be thinking about how we get that done. That's been in conversation since the 80s. I'd really like us to find a way to make that an actual transportation greenway from up 45th Avenue to at least University.
I think there was some conversations not too long ago, right, about maybe last year about how to revive that plan and what would be
Oh, yeah.
needed. And I believe Linda de Metropolis in the Parks Department was leading that effort. I think she's with Nature
Yeah.
Conservation piece, but she was coordinating.
Nature operations.
Nature
I
Operations,
think that's the title. Yeah.
And I think she's the manager there. But we were talking about what would it take to make this happen and what are the constraints. And there is a very old plan that I think is 90s or 80s, you're right?
Was that before the charter amendment that said we probably couldn't do that?
Yes.
Yes, it was before
And then
that.
we repealed that, but even then, even if, there was very specific, standards structured in there for how wide things were going to be, how it was going to wrap through once it came out through what's now the Hogtown Creek Greenway south of 8th, how that would go around that cool little bridge there, come up past, I think it's called the Gainesville Mall, what is the name of that?
Yeah, the old Gainesville Mall.
Yeah, and then going over into Split Rock Conservation
Right through
Area.
Wednesday
Whether or not
Road.
that's paved or not, I would like to see that be a transportation corridor at some point. I wasn't sure whether to get into any of this, but we're incredibly close to making that at least a connected, like, a linear park. There's only a couple of parcels. Some parcels are a little bit harder than others, but I would like to see us figure out, I know ACT is working on possibly.
ACT has a subcommittee dedicated to just this, which is acquiring being best, or getting deeded the land. And the first land we're looking at is the land at the back of Lowe's, because that's the best bang for the buck. It goes all the way along Hogtown Creek, pretty much all the way to 29. So that's the one we're concentrating on, and then there's other sections that have existing trails. Be very easy, it's just a case of saying, yeah, go ahead. And a lot of those trails, a mountain bike will handle everything, but frequently, for example, Commissioner Eastman's bike got fat tires and electric motor. It can handle a lot of off-road trails. It doesn't have to be paved. And once you have to have a paved trail or a boardwalk, the expense just goes through the roof. If you have to have say a 4-foot wide trail, which is hard packed, there is a lot of creek setbacks if that's a possibility.
Well, and a lot of what you were talking about earlier with creek setbacks, that's the answer to most of what's left.
Yes.
That we don't own on.
That's the existing corridor of the city.
Yeah.
It can't ever be developed. It's not developed frequently. Right. It's effectively developed because the development rights have been transferred somewhere else, so it's not worth anything.
Right.
Well, I know that you guys have worked in the past. I mean, so we own, when you look down that, you'll see a lot of green space that goes right around that Hogtown Creek. And a lot of that was, my understanding, in preparation for this idea that we were going to have a linear park that connects all the way down there. So there's only a couple of parcels left, and we, with that Lowe's property, you'd be able to connect the 29th Street down through Lowe's, down through Alfred E. Ring, it would pop out on 16th. Then you're getting into some private property on, you'd have to either go through a road, or we'd have to figure out some of the lots that are in Florida Park that are now, close to single-family homes, so it's probably harder now than it would have been, 20, 30 years ago.
Some of those are flood hazards at this point. I mean,
I don't know the backgrounds of some of them.
Problems.
But then that would connect all the way down to Hogtown, to the Hogtown Creek Greenway. I mean, that is an enormous section of just linear park that would be close to a lot of people's homes, and is, frankly, I mean, I guess it's a public meeting, but I've walked the whole thing, and some of those trails, particularly the ones that are not open to the public, are some of my favorite trails in the city. I mean, they're amazing, they're beautiful, and being able to give access to the public for those would be a huge coup for the city.
There's also the possibility sometimes, for example, between 16th and 8th, there's a platted right-of-way that is not developed. And there's little platted right-of-ways all the way through the city that people, they're in their backyard, so there's a lot of encroachment. So people sort of have taken ownership of them, but it's really public land. I think that's the low-hanging fruit. And that's one thing the city could do fairly cheaply, is survey all of the platted right-of-ways that are not developed in the city and put that into the transportation plan. Some of them can be used for paved trails. They're high and dry. I mean, the original intention was to turn them into roads.
Yeah.
23rd Avenue, for example, goes all the way to, 34th Street. Goes for a number of backyards. So there would be neighborhood kickback from the people who border it, for sure. Also, some of the neighbors that live nearby say, hey, that's a great idea, I can walk it. And now I can jump on my bike and not have to go on 16th Avenue or Glen Springs Road to go east-west, and it makes a connected with north-south routes, and suddenly you have a safe network that you can bicycle along from your home to your work.
The two north-south trail routes that I would really like to see us focus on, before I say that, there are two ways we can do it. We continue to piecemeal and take things when there's an opportunity to take, but develop, map out when there's an opportunity, spend money on when there's an opportunity, or we can be more intentional about it and say, these 2 or 3 greenways are going to be a focus, and we're going to do what we need to do to do that. And there's nothing wrong with either one of those approaches, we just need to pick one. Because we're not going to do both. I mean, realistically, if we're not intentional, then it just becomes the piecemeal approach, which is kind of where we've been for a couple of decades. And maybe that's fine, but we ought to have a conversation about it and how that works. And does that move us along from a transportation and recreation standpoint, as well as being intentional about a couple? I would obviously prefer that we be more intentional. And I would like us to be intentional about Hogtown Creek Greenway and the Sweetwater Branch Greenway. We already own nearly the entire potential greenway north of 4th Avenue. Really north of, even much farther south than that. Most of that greenway is either general government or GRU
Remember about
property
Sweetwater?
already. Yes, we
Yeah, did that just end the Tom Petty Park place? Well, not even quite there.
So, if we considered doing that greenway as part of the grid system up to Tom Petty Park, that's probably the most logical way to do it. So there's a trailhead at the park, and another trailhead at eventually the sheet flow. But, gosh, from 10th Avenue to southeast 4th Avenue, that's easy. That's really easy. It's just a question of bringing the neighborhoods along, because we own it. And it's clear. I mean, 4 blocks of it theoretically is already a park with a paved path already. We just don't ever activate that and do anything with it.
So 2 things, and I'm going to compare again to Fayetteville, Arkansas. I hate to beat on this, but their trail system, to begin with, it's been funded multiple times at the ballot box. That it was very clear as part of their transportation bond measure. And so some of it laid out like kind of more in detail, like these are the projects we want to get done. And theirs, they started off it started off as a central north-south spine. It was very clear, this is the first thing we're going to do. Happens to be a rail trail, alongside railroad. So it was kind of an easy lift. But then they very specifically branched out, so it becomes a spine, it becomes the beginning of a network. And they got that laid down early with more, with a lot of the funds that they personally put forward. After that, the Walton Foundation, the state, other grants start to get interested in some of the other pieces. But their strategy was, let's lay down a backbone of this, because people will get to there somehow. We still want more trails, but that provides, so wherever people were at in town, either by walk or bike or pushing a stroller, they would alter their route to get to that path and then take that for as long as possible, then go off. It might make your trip longer, but it's so easy so you can get to that path. And they really succeeded in doing a really strong north-south, and then they branched out to do their east-west, and they had to do some piecing together. But the goal was that north-south, got that done. A center of town east-west, basically got that done. A south town east-west, got it done. North side, they're getting close to getting it done. And they laid it out like that because they understood it as a transportation system. And so you're talking a little more about that,
Right.
These corridors where, greenways, whatever we call them, but that it is intentional to really start to provide a framework of how people can get around the city, not just on the bicycle or by foot, but some of it kind of grade separated, separate users of our streets, so they can be there and cars can be somewhere else. Unfortunately, there's not on the south side, Depot Trail provides a bit of a good east-west, but it's just very, very far south, which is fine to get people to campus downtown. It's just very far south.
And if we connect that from the north and south to that, then that gets people from northeast neighborhoods or from southeast neighborhoods to the most dense employment center in North Florida.
And some of that, and so some of that as a corridor, and I think this is part of, we haven't quite talked about it, is that some of it may just be the improvement of Depot Waldo, because that trail is there. That trail,
Right.
But I will tell you, as someone who's biked it, and I believe very close to where someone was hit and killed by the semi-truck on Southeast, was it 4th, 10th? It was very close
It
to
was 9th Street,
where
yeah.
9th. that crossing of the trail there, I guess we call it Waldo Road Greenway Depot Ave Rail Trail there. There's not even a crosswalk of the trail over Southeast 9th Street. And I remember riding it like, this is insane. That is cheap to paint it on. But the trail there is also narrower than most trails tend to be. So so part of it is, I mean, technically, we have, it's not really a north-south or an east-west, but you can get from the airport all the way down Depot, all the way to UF, and then once it's all completed through some of that land, yeah, you can ride almost, eventually the idea is you're gonna go ride from basically Cedar Key to at least our airport, you know. I don't know if it's going all the way out to Cedar Key, but,
Well, certainly from Parker Road eventually.
right, so, you know, all the way out there. So we kind of have that in Depot Waldo. We probably need to not forget about that, because it's there and it's almost all built. It is, but the thing is, it's kind of a diagonal. It's not a north-south, east-west, so it kind of cuts across. But it's there, and I think it needs some improvement to be truly part of that connection, because University Avenue, I think, just stops the traffic dead, the bike traffic, walking traffic, because that is such a beast to cross, and I don't know the solution right there. But we have that, and then, you know, yeah, and I will voice an opinion about the, not Octown, the Sweetwater, is that is the duck, you know, that's in the middle of the duck pond. This is a pretty nice neighborhood that has an abundance of parks already. If you look at Roper, if you look at Thompson, there's a park, which, you know, it's park-like. And you look at Reserve Park, and it's really not that far from Depot Park. This would connect it, in essence, to Depot Park. And we look at all that, and I do just want to, whether it's a nice trail that's a linear, particularly when we start talking about the idea of linear park, which would be Greenway. Southwest Gainesville does not have enough parks at all, and so I do have an opinion of parks in east or central Gainesville as opposed to southwest Gainesville, and so it's something I want to continue to fight for. There's been some new trail development on 40th and Tufts 27th, which I loved, and I talked to neighbors when I was knocking on doors, because that was an example of something that was needed for years and years. There were no sidewalks out there.
That was the example of the latent demand in the cow paths.
Oh yeah, on both sides, it was very fair, and then, cause I remember years ago in that neighborhood, and then one day I drove by, so I'm like, I had missed it in the news, like, oh my goodness, they did it. I'm so thankful. And some of that has been connected, so. Anyways, those are two things about that. Creating it really as a backbone of a system, but I think you're right that we have to make that a priority. We have to say, this is going to provide hopefully a backbone of a transportation system, and from there you branch out, but to provide something substantial so that people can go a long distance, and because when we talk about transportation, we are talking about real miles. So I like the idea of both of those corridors, particularly if we think about Sweetwater as, if we're really talking about the bike corridor, between roughly Tom Petty Park and getting over to the 6th Street Trail, because at that point the 6th Street Trail is almost on Main, Of course, north of 16th it's not paved, but that's part of the plan, right? Because we have.
That's what we're working on.
Right, do we own the right of way?
No,
We
it's
don't,
CSX.
but
right
CSX,
away.
I mean, there's no track on it. It's all between 16th and
23rd, I think. And then
Yeah.
there's that plan to connect all the way even to 39th eventually.
Coppers.
To Coppers, and then there may be opportunity to even skirting the Public Works complex somewhere
And if you-
coming out on 39th.
And if you read through the Coppers, the settlement, or I'm not sure where it is, but like it's a very odd settlement. I mean, it's mostly jargon about cleaning up the Superfund site. But then there's one section in there. I don't know how it got in there that if the city of Gainesville ever wants to build a bike trail connecting its 6th Street up, that they will allow that. I don't know. I'm not sure how that got in there,
Yeah,
but like
we
it's
put that
there and
in.
ready for us whenever we're
Yeah,
ready to do it.
it skirts the front of the property, and the alignment. I think it's on one of the sides that connects all the way to the north. Yeah.
And the 16th, I used to live right by the trail on 16th, right by Civilization Restaurant that used to be there
Mhm.
for a while. I lived there. There's not great, I don't think there's great demand between 16th and 23rd, except 23rd is where the Greyhound station is, so maybe there is.
Right.
Right,
you
but
know.
then you have all the housing element there on on 39th Avenue that faces and is,
Yeah, so I think
Mind-blowing.
part of it is we don't know that there's demand, but I think there could be, when you create these connections, I think suddenly also people decide where they live. If you're a waiter in downtown Gainesville, you could take the 6th Street Trail all the way from 39th, dump you out on 6th Street to go, you know,
changes
6th Street
things.
Trail. It really, and we're in Fayetteville, Arkansas, that's what I know. We're all doing it for recreation, but the number of people in all black clothing, because they're like waiters, dishwashers, all kinds, and not on $3,000 bikes, on $250 bikes. And you can see them in their outfits, their uniforms, where they're going to work. And then people literally decide where to live because they can jump on a bike, go downtown and be a waiter or whatever.
And it isn't just bikes, the pedestrians, the existing trails are heavily used by
Yeah.
pedestrians. It's a safe way to walk off the streets, and they get tremendous use.
I go to a lot of playgrounds now because I got a 2-year-old, and I ride my bike around just because that's how I get around. And I'll say that, like, I'm surprised at how often I go to playgrounds and, like, I'm the only one on the playground, and then I'll ride my bike back and there's all these people like within the same, it's like, it's amazing. And I don't know what people are doing there in the middle of the day, but they're just walking, they're getting their exercise. I mean, it's amazing how much these linear trails really get use. You know,
You said we have some counts of those?
yeah, we have mobile counters that we can, they're not very sophisticated to distinguish a cyclist and a pedestrian, but they give the overall volume of people walking on those, and I can provide that. And I think we need to make those maps more available too and make them more visible. So if we have them at key locations and have some prints and have the address, because right now everything is pretty much, it used to be that we had printed materials and they handed out, but then one thing and another, and then we don't anymore. Everybody goes online for everything, so, but I think to make people more aware of what we have
Yeah.
and the facility types and at least where to go to obtain the information, because our website is not very user-friendly at the moment. We're
I will agree
improving
with
it.
that.
Yeah,
Over the years, I looked
Yeah.
at, to figure out where all these trails are, because I don't know.
yeah.
Avid people who are out riding, they figure it out, and then suddenly that's what they do. The people first discovering, kind of trying to map out how to get somewhere. And I don't know what those best types are on websites.
Are you running to
but,
another meeting?
Just about 10 minutes, yeah.
But it definitely does help. And, you know, the better information we provide, I mean, apartment complexes will probably also, they say, look, we're close to this trail, we're, you know,
Right.
it's-
Can I leap into the one thing I want to talk about before we got off on this?
Yeah, I fully intended to talk about separated bike paths today. But
Yeah, so within our EDCM, we have that, like, that now is required above a certain speed, I believe, like, that you would have the protected bollards in there.
Could you
Yeah.
just, instead of acronym, could you say EDCM?
The EDCM, the Engineering Design and Construction Manual.
Thank you.
Generally, your engineering design and construction manual is like kind of a wonky document for developers as they're utilizing things. Generally, what I have seen that cities do is within their land development code point to something that's a little bit more street standards, like this one. You were referring to this before, but this is fairly common where you have either, as we said, over time, complete streets policy. I think Tampa has like they call it something different. Recently, you see bicycle and pedestrian guidelines, but a lot of that is because if you look at, like, say, the Florida Department of Transportation's Green Book, there's all kinds of really thoughtful design standards for how to design roads so that they slope just right as you're turning down, and that, you know, that and bicycle and pedestrian facilities have always been an afterthought and kind of left to municipalities to figure out what the right design structures of that would be. And so you'll see this in Gainesville, you'll see it across the board, just sort of inconsistency within design, or like you can kind of see over the years where you know, what was discussed in that era versus the next era, which is fine. Like, that's true with cities. Cities are sort of retrofits on retrofits, right? But having design standards that sort of delineate, maybe perhaps better than the engineering design and construction manual would be like, what speed should bollards go in, if they're, that are more kind of, they're flexible so that we're not overruling, where it makes sense to put certain places, but like, making sure that we're, like, here's what, here's roughly what we should be looking for when you're having, I have some portions in here, like what, different curb radii, just like some of the, so that, which has a huge impact on how a car is coming out. As you pointed out, Harvey, a lot of our roads are not ours. Like, they are county roads, they are state roads, and having something you could point to and say, these are the standards that our city has said we want within, this speed of road or that speed of road, that both we would live to in the future, but also we could hand to the county as they're working on roads, I think would be really beneficial. I recognize that you guys are experts in your field and you don't necessarily want, something that will dictate exactly this is what you should be doing, but within context sensitivity, it would make sense to me there would be something that we would have that we could update on a semi-regular basis.
Yes, I think the option was on the implementation and development of this guide is that there are already all of these resources out there. For example, the National Association for Cities, NACTO, I don't know the full acronym right now, maybe Vincent, you know, I don't remember. But it gives all of these references and best practices on how to implement a facility type per all of these that you mentioned, the speed, the type, the context. So we incorporated that as a reference in the document instead of having to replicate and copy everything that's in the other document. So that was the approach that we used. So we don't have, oh, here you do this, but we go back to that resource and we apply what that best practice dictates. But you are right that we don't say specifically because we reference the other resource.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if we
But
need
there's-
to
but there's certain-
formulate and do something a little bit more specific and make it more clear that that's how we're doing it, and then maybe we can.
Well, and there's certain things, I was just in Austin writing, mostly just to check out, they had done similar to what it seems like Fayetteville did, is they passed a transportation bond, part of that was just updating roads, right? Then they also threw in some sweeteners in there, things like, they have a great urban trail system plan because they needed that to pass the bond. They have a really good bicycle pedestrian master plan because they needed to pass the bond. They had failed 2 or 3 times the transportation bond, and so they had a lot of thoughtful design work that had been going on for years, and then they implemented it very quickly because they had a whole lot of money. And one of the things that was nice there was like, you knew, is because there were certain design standards, even though there was different place where bollards were driven, there's different place where you'd have parking protected, bike lanes, you sort of knew that as they had certain things like the lines would get shorter as you went in there, which meant you knew if you've been riding just for, a couple hours, that meant that the bike lane was going to come to an end. If you're in Gainesville, bike lane just ends sometimes, or sometimes there's a little sign. I am low, I'm looking down at this thing, and I in my peripheral vision, I guess, it's really designed for cars. It says bike lane ends, but that's not particularly helpful for a cyclist. There needs to be something on the road because that's really where our eyes are going. There's little design standards like that just allow some consistency, which makes it safer for, I think, everyone utilizing any of these things.
And it's just
So
like the same thing as like bike boxes at intersections and.
yeah, and we're implementing a lot of those bike boxes like you saw by the University of Florida, but a lot of times you'll implement the green lines and things like that where there's a high likelihood that there's going to be crashes, right? And so you would put those in there. But what ADT and what speed would that make the most sense, and where would it make sense to do bike box? Or maybe you just leave it up to the engineers, but say if you should be thinking of designing it in these instances, here's how it would be designed so that it matches sort of the standards that we're looking at.
Or for example, what even the trail crossing across the street is, the Southeast 9th, if you're driving, unless you absolutely know what is there, there's no sign to suggest, this is where bikes are gonna be. This is just, there might be I can't remember if there's a small, but that's bad, that's a bad street trail interaction, because there's not a standard, and I think that is, to your point, I think that's something that was built many years ago. It's a narrower path, and I think now we got this idea that they really need to be wider for multi-use, because what we know is it's not just bikes, it's not just walkers. Both of them gotta have enough room, right? So I think that standard has gotten has gotten wider. But yeah, there, you know, I've literally thought, how is the neighborhood not just throwing a fit about it?
Yeah.
Is that southeast?
Yes.
Southeast 9th, and I didn't remember exactly the details of who was hit and killed. But my fear was like, oh my goodness, were they actually on the trail? And there's a bad crossing, because the way it was described, it was so close. I'd have to talk to GPD to find out exactly.
Yeah, it's, and that stretch of Ninth, south of Second, south of the, what we call it, the bed and breakfast district, down to 7th Avenue, I mean, that's where the Cotton Club is. So as that gets more use, and as people realize that you can use that as a corridor to get to the trail and to get to Depot Park, 9th Street, Southeast 9th Street is going to get a lot more pedestrian and cyclist use. So that whole.
So I'm concerned
that
about it
stretch
particularly,
needs-
but it sounds like this is part of this would help us identify, if some of this, if we come up with standards, then we can also then go back and say.
We can apply the standards.
We can apply it, we can identify.
A lot of it is just like when things get repaved, you say like, hey, you know, Public Works or Transportation or DOT or whatever, this is this is how we do this. You know, you should just apply these standards there.
Right.
And a lot of it is because driving is just, it's so in the back of your head, right? Like, I mean, crosswalks, you can cross, I think, at any cross street, right, legally. That is not jaywalking. But we don't put crosswalks there. We put crosswalks where we want cars to know, watch out for people here. And we want people to know this is roughly a safe place for you to go. I mean, it is more psychology than it is legally you're allowed to cross there. And but that means having consistency, letting cars sort of know on a regular basis, and pedestrians and cyclists, everyone to sort of know this is the standard. And it's not like you can write it down in a book. It just has to be something that you feel intuitively, which means it has to be consistent, has to be applied, you know, across the board on a semi-regular way.
So what would you like to do, what would y'all like to do to move this forward to a general policy?
Oh, great. Well, it's coming up on General Policy Committee meeting here, if you want to read it beforehand. Yeah, this is street standards. I don't know, the Greenways Master Plan is in my box, but I haven't.
Okay. And when, do you know?
When is this up? February something or other?
23rd?
Yeah, maybe 23rd.
23rd, okay.
Yeah.
Very good, all right. Do you have discussion about greenways in here? About the-
I can send you that. It just came through to me from the Public Policy Review.
Yeah,
About how, the various ways master plans are designed and how we can move forward. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, 'cause I would like us to get to a position where we can take some action on saying, these are our priorities for greenways.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is through GPC.
All right.
If I may.
Yeah.
There may be some things missing in that, so I don't know if you received some additional feedback from,
Yes.
staff kind of looked at it and there's some components missing. It doesn't truly represent the city, what we do, but
Okay.
just throwing it out there.
Well, then, read it and then know that it's inaccurate.
Incomplete.
I wouldn't say inaccurate, maybe
Incomplete,
incomplete.
Yeah.
Right, but it does it goes a lot of those other cities, so we can start to think about other places.
Well, I'm sorry I wasn't able to meet with you guys about this before bringing it up here, but we should schedule that so that I can, because, I mean, I want to lean on you guys' knowledge and expertise and all this stuff so that we're getting something that we can really use going forward.
By the way, when we rolled out Thrive GNV, the dashboard, one of the things we're measuring is bike and pedestrian injuries and deaths.
Okay.
That'll be out there.
All right.
Thanks, Sean. I gotta go. Good to see you.
Is anyone, you're on staff? No.
We're the consultants working on the PD&E.
Oh, okay.
So just,
Well, I just want,
understand what priorities we're going to.
I just wanted to give the other community member, did you want to say something, Joe?
No, I was trying to figure out what you all were talking about, and
Yeah.
because it usually, the way you do with these different meetings, stuff kind of gets sprung on us, so I'm just trying to see what's going on.
It's just a sunshine meeting, and
I know
I've not
it's a
been,
sunshine meeting.
I've only had one, and it was with Mayor Ward before I won, so I'm not sure how these normally go. Maybe I'm doing it all wrong, but I mean, this.
Well, we can have that discussion later.
Basically, I mean, in essence, I mean, I know for me saying, yeah, let's meet, is because we don't, even just getting to share ideas, kick them around, hear people's priorities as opposed to this being a very long comment at a city commission
Okay,
meeting. So-
just for your information, since you guys were teenagers probably when I started watching
Yeah.
the city and stuff, when that general policy committee was made, it was an idea that it would give both the commissioners and citizens the opportunity to sit around the table and just talk, kind of like you were doing. But that was the general policy committee. It started out no action, no votes, and it was supposed to be just this kind of thing. I have an idea, I'd like to talk about it. Let's, see if there's interest on the commission to move it forward. The whole procedures have really been changed over time, I feel, very candidly, to the detriment of the public, and I think to your detriment too, right? And,
Because sometimes there's actions taken.
well, yeah, and I believe they shouldn't be. It's kind of like, oh, we'll put a general policy, and somebody brings something up at the last minute, like the hiring. I think that happened at a general policy meeting. It's citizen comment. Things are sometimes brought up that the public doesn't know, that it's going to be talked about. We get no input. It's down here. It seems like it's less formal. So I really think that, that's important. It's important that you guys have the background because.
Hiring was, I think it's that we just happened to meet here for a city commission meeting.
Okay, I may have that wrong, but that's still okay.
Just that one-
The whole thing is
just
you
remember that
bringing
one
things
meeting.
up at
We happened to meet here.
commission comments and it getting derailed, so, not derailed, voted on. So what you're saying about what you're, using these one-on-ones for, you've created extra meetings for the public to try to, see what's going on, where that used to happen at the general policy meeting and people were more aware of it and, the one-on-ones or whatever, sunshine meetings, that you call. You're just creating more and more meetings for you all, and then you feel like you're full-time commissioners, and I welcome the time. I haven't had time to meet with you individually and just tell you what I feel on this, and I didn't intend to even talk at this meeting, but Brian, you asked, I appreciate you trying to include citizens, but I'm happy to talk to you about, privately, whatever. Publicly, I only get 3 minutes, otherwise I would do it publicly.
I got you on the timer. I'm joking.
I don't like the behind the scenes. I think most of your discussion should be in public, and it's, when the GPC was transformed into essentially another meeting where you could vote, that was another step, I think, in the wrong directions for public participation and transparency.
We'll be talking about that at GPC, I think,
Huh?
tomorrow, right, is the public comment. and
Well,
public
I think we're
information.
gonna
Yeah.
talking.
And I'm gonna have 3 minutes, and, anybody who has any comments,
But
is not gonna have.
part of your point is that both the structure, the frequency of GPC, the structure of it, and then I hear what you're saying about this meeting as an added meeting. And what I will say is that, yes, this could have been a conversation. And in essence, it will continue to be a conversation at a GPC.
Yeah, but it's
in the
different,
future.
it's
I get
different
it.
when you sit around at the GPC meeting, it's not that a citizen could come up and share the background that we have that you don't, or opinions or whatever, it's 3 minutes and say your 3 minutes and we're gonna go on with what we're gonna do, because that's how it feels, not only to Joe Beatty, but to the public. And I'm gonna be quiet because Mr. Blunt is there, and he might have something to say.
Okay, Carly, do you have anything to say?
Oh, I'm visible. A lot about your topic of for bike and pedestrian safety. There was a concept one time called Infinity Loop that came forward through CRA. I don't know if it ever got to the commission, but it was some people were talking about it. I think it just kind of got deflated because the staff person who brought it up just happened not to be ascendant in the organization. You know, it was killed because of the messenger.
Well, Commissioner Ariola actually asked for a review right before he left, and I'm not sure where we are with that review, but it seems to have gotten some to be revived a bit.
That was going to give a safe bike and ped connection to all 4 sectors with some really notable nodes for me, because I live near it, the intersection of University and Waldo Road. They were talking about a bike ped overpass diagonally from southwest to northeast, or you don't know, you like landmarks from auto supply to Walgreens.
Yeah.
That would have made that a really safer connection. Of course, that would need cooperation from the state because of the roads. But and the mayor brought up the strip park along the creek from University down to 4th Avenue. I mean, right now, because of GRU's clearing out, I know they have some equipment down closer to Depot Park that they can't decommission now, but all the way down to 5th Avenue, that creek could be opened now and the park continue. There's nothing going on, there's nothing in the way, and it's only going to get more expensive. So why not do it now and show what it can be?
So you may have missed because you came in just a little late,
Yeah.
but I think I did mention Infinity Loop because we were talking about some of the GRU right-of-ways, what we own or what we have access to land for some of these corridors. Because part of that Infinity Loop, I believe a portion of it goes along some GRU land, or at least easements, or areas we have access to. So we brought that up real briefly, but we didn't really talk about how that will end up connecting some of these corridors, even like the wall from Waldo over to what would be Sweetwater. And then really, like I mentioned, on 16th, you're not that far away from the 6th Street Trail through, you have to cross Main, but it's really not that far. So up there, that's where you do get some good cross connectivity between north-south routes. You actually get something that's kind of east-west. So we brought that up kind of in the beginning, but we didn't completely talk about that. Probably because we were talking a little more about greenways, corridors, things that are going to be larger north-south projects. But that takes into account some of the pieces of what we're talking about. But when that came out, I thought it was really interesting because it uses, it goes from very urban to very not kind of rural, nature rural, right, out to Sweetwater.
And we own almost all the right-of-way that would be required for that. Thanks for reminding. I'll follow up with staff. It's a shame that our transportation person.
Can I put us up about the Infinity Loop? There's actually 2 Wild Spaces Public Places project, the Sweetwater branch and then the Williston Road branch, which are in fact part of that Infinity Loop. They're connected from the Gainesville-Hawthorne Trail down to Sweetwater. So that's a crucial link, which is about to be built, I think. And then the rest of the loop part of it is actually 16th Avenue along the north side, which is a county-owned road, so that when they redo that road, they'll probably put an off-road trail there. That would complete it up there. And then the southern part of it, the only part missing, is the link from the Sweetwater Wetland Park to the Gainesville-Hawthorne Trail. And what I suggest you do is talk to the Paynes Prairie manager about the possibility of making that connection, because it's all public land. It could easily be done. I think politically it could be a problem.
Yeah.
As additional information on that piece that you were mentioning, it needs to be part of the state conservation plan. And we talked to the state, and it's in a 10-year cycle, and I've been trying to get with them to see what is the next step and how to make that happen. But I haven't received any feedback yet.
Who oversees, what department oversees that?
I need to go back to my notes. I don't remember correctly, but I'll bring that back.
All right.
That would be beautiful. That would be a trail through Paynes Prairie. It would be an iconic trail. That would, and Daniel Gill in his, have you seen his capstone project presentation? He has beautiful graphics about how to build it and what it would be, and it would just be wonderful. I agree.
All right.
I just
Yes.
want to say one thing. that, I just want you, commissioners, to know that if I talk, what might seem to be negatively about some of this, I really like the ideas and I like that you're looking to the future, but I'm very concerned, so I'm just telling you this for anything Joe Beatty may say in the future about this or many other things, doesn't mean that I think the idea that you've got is bad or you should stop it or, you know, not be looking to the future. But I am very concerned that you have things right now, and you've not been privy to my comments, but the foundation of the city, I think, is crucial, and that I think that commissioners take too many initiatives looking forward to projects before we've solidified the basement. And so I just want, when I speak, you to hear it in the context and where I'm coming from. It's not that these aren't all good ideas and that I wouldn't support them. If I felt and the citizens felt that the foundation was good. And I think before we start thinking about all these different ways to spend money and pay consultants and such, that we really need to focus on reining things in, making this town affordable by looking at GRU and where we're spending money, you know, and what our overall finances are. So I just want you to, I want to make sure you hear my comments in context, because I know I'm probably seen as very negative and against a lot of these progressive ideas, but I think we have to look at the situation holistically, and, you know, I think it'd be much better that my input would be taken if you understand the context. So,
Thank you,
okay,
Jeff.
thank you.
I have 3 o'clock, so yeah, I gotta get.
I'm here 3 o'clock, don't worry.
That's what I was thinking.